People say the hardest part of losing a husband is the grief. They aren't wrong about the grief. But nobody warns you about what comes after, not the absence of sound, but the specific absence of his sounds. Edward used to hum while he made coffee. Off-key, always the same 3 bars of something he could never quite remember the name of. For 31 years, I woke up to that sound. For 5 months now, I'd been waking up to nothing. I stood at the front desk of the Magnolia House that Tuesday morning, going through reservation confirmations the way I'd done 1,000 times before, except now I was doing it alone. My husband and I had built this bed and breakfast from the ground up. A 1904 Victorian on East Battery Street in Charleston, South Carolina. 8 rooms, wraparound porch, and a kitchen garden Edward tended like it was something holy. We'd opened it 22 years ago, back when our daughter was still in middle school, and we were either brave or foolish enough to pour our savings into a dream. Turned out we were both. The inn was still running. Barely. I had 2 part-time staff members who'd been with us for years, and they were kind enough to carry more than their share without making me feel it. But the bookkeeping, the vendor calls, the small decisions that used to belong to Edward, those had fallen to me, and some days I moved through them like I was trying to read in the dark. My cell phone buzzed on the counter. My daughter's name lit up the screen. I answered on the second ring. "Hey, baby." "Mama." Her voice sounded different. Tight, like she was trying to hold something in. "Terrell and I want to come see you this weekend. There's some things we need to talk about." I set down the pen I was holding. "Of course. You know you don't have to ask." "It's about the inn and Daddy's estate." A pause that lasted too long. "We'll talk when we get there. Don't worry, okay? It's nothing bad. We just want to make sure you're taken care of." She said it, the way people say things when they've already decided what's going to happen, and they're just waiting for you to catch up. After we hung up, I stood in the front hallway of the inn I'd loved for more than 2 decades, looking at the framed photographs on the wall. Edward and me at the grand opening, younger than I remembered being. The 2 of us on the porch swings last 4th of July, his arm around my shoulders. I had not moved those photographs an inch since the day he died. He'd gone to the hospital for what we thought was a routine heart check, the kind doctors schedule when you're 66 and your numbers have been creeping. He never came home. Cardiac arrest, they told me. Fast. He hadn't suffered. I kept telling myself that. He hadn't suffered. My daughter arrived that Friday evening with her husband and a bottle of wine and smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. She was 36, beautiful in the way that used to remind me of Edward's sister. Strong jaw, careful posture, the kind of woman who thought before she spoke. Her husband was 39, a project manager in commercial real estate development. He had the handshake of a man who thought handshakes communicated something about him. Firm, slightly too long. They'd been married 6 years. I'd never been able to say exactly what bothered me about him, only that Edward had once described him as ambitious in ways he hasn't earned yet, which was about as close to criticism as Edward ever came. We ate dinner on the porch the way we always did when they visited. Shrimp and grits, sweet tea, the smell of salt air coming off the harbor. Conversation floated around easy things. The inn's summer bookings, his new project, a neighbor's renovation on Trad Street. But underneath it all ran something else. Something I kept feeling at the edge of my awareness without being able to name it. Finally, my daughter set down her fork. "Mama, we've been thinking about your situation." "My situation," I repeated. "Running this place alone." She glanced at her husband, who gave her the smallest nod. "It's a lot. The liability, the financials, the maintenance. Daddy always handled so much of that, and we're worried you're overwhelmed." I folded my napkin carefully. "I'm managing." "Are you, though?" Her husband leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Because the Q1 numbers I saw, your revenue is down almost 18% from this time last year." I looked at him. "Where did you see my Q1 numbers?" He didn't miss a beat. "Your daughter mentioned them. She has access to the shared accounting folder." She did. I'd set it up years ago for tax season convenience, a shared folder with our CPA. I'd never thought to remove her access after Edward died. "What we're proposing," my daughter continued, her voice careful and practiced in a way that made my chest tighten, "is a limited power of attorney arrangement, just for financial decisions, business operations. It would let my husband help manage some of the bigger decisions while you focus on what you love, the guests, the garden, the day-to-day. Power of attorney. The phrase landed like a stone dropped in still water. I have an attorney, I said quietly. I have a CPA. Everything's been handled properly since your father passed. Those are strangers, Mama. My daughter reached across the table and touched my hand. We're family. We just want to help. I looked at her. I looked at him. And I thought about what Edward had said about ambition and what it looks like when it hasn't earned itself yet. Let me think about it, I said. They left Sunday morning. After they drove away, I went directly to Edward's study. He had kept meticulous records his entire life, an engineer's habit carried into everything. Filing cabinets color-coded, folders labeled in his cramped, precise handwriting. I knew this room the way you know a person. I knew where everything lived. Which was how I noticed, immediately, that something had moved. The third drawer of his left cabinet was not closed all the way. Edward never left a drawer open. And the folder containing our estate documents, the will, the trust paperwork, the insurance policies, had its tabs slightly misaligned, a detail so small most people wouldn't have registered it. But Edward had taught me to notice small things. Small things, he used to say, are where the truth hides. Someone had been through these files. I sat down in his chair and stared at the cabinet for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called my sister. My sister Doris had retired 3 years ago from a career that had taken her from our grandmother's kitchen table in Orangeburg, South Carolina, all the way to a senior partnership at a financial consulting firm in Chicago. 40 years as a CPA and financial forensics specialist. She was 68 years old, sharp as the day we were born, and she had the particular gift of seeing through arrangements that were designed to look like something else. We'd grown apart over the years. She'd been in Chicago so long that visiting felt like crossing into a different world. But when I needed her, I called. Something's wrong here, I told her. I can feel it, and I need you to help me understand what I'm feeling. She was quiet for a moment, then, tell me what happened. I told her everything. When I finished, she said, don't touch anything in that office. I'll be there by Thursday. She flew in Wednesday evening, 2 days early, rolling up to the inn in a rental car with one suitcase and the same expression she used to wear when we were girls, and I'd gotten myself into something I didn't know how to get out of. She looked around the front parlor of the Magnolia House the way she looked at everything, taking it in, organizing it, filing it. Show me the estate documents, she said, before she even took off her coat. We went to the study together. My sister put on reading glasses and went through the will with the focused silence of a woman who had spent a career decoding what legal language was actually saying versus what it wanted you to think it was saying. She read for a long time. I sat in Edward's chair and waited. When she reached the last section, she went still. Did you know about this? She turned the document toward me and pointed to a clause near the end. Section 12. I'd skimmed it once, weeks ago, thinking it was standard boilerplate. It wasn't. All property rights and inheritance benefits accorded to Keisha Renee Alderton are subject to the following conditions. 1. Continuous active involvement in the operation of the Magnolia House bed and breakfast for a minimum period of 2 calendar years following the death of Edward Leonard Alderton. 2. Demonstrated financial transparency and accountability to co-trustee. 3. Conduct toward Judith Alderton that reflects respect and support, as assessed by the co-trustee and one witness of Judith Alderton's choosing. Failure to satisfy any of these conditions results in full forfeiture of inheritance rights pertaining to the property. All assets revert to Judith Alderton with full autonomy. I read it twice. 3 times the words didn't change. Edward never told me about this, I whispered. He told me. My sister set the document down carefully. He called me about 8 months before he died. Said he was worried, that something felt off about your son-in-law's interest in the property. He didn't say he had proof of anything, just that he wanted to make sure the inn was protected. That you were protected. She paused. He named me co-trustee without telling you because he knew you'd argue about it. I almost laughed. That was so entirely like Edward. Does my daughter know about this clause? I asked. If she'd read the will carefully, she would. But I think whoever went through these files got there first. My sister looked at the filing cabinet. Your son-in-law is in commercial real estate development. Yes. What kind of developments? Hospitality properties, mostly. Hotels. He's mentioned flipping historic buildings before. Adaptive reuse, he called it. My sister was quiet for a moment. I want to run something. Do you have a computer I can use? She spent 2 hours in the study that night while I made tea neither of us drank. When she came out, her expression had shifted into something harder. There's a company called Tidewater Acquisitions Group, she said. They specialize in purchasing historic inns and B&Bs along the South Carolina and Georgia Low Country. They commissioned an appraisal on the Magnolia House 6 weeks ago. I found the assessors filing through the county records. My throat went dry. I didn't authorize any appraisal. I know. The appraisal came in at $1.1 million. My sister set her reading glasses on the table. The inn's market value is closer to $2.4 million based on comparable sales. They were lowballing it. The pieces began assembling themselves in my mind, slow and cold. Who's behind Tidewater Acquisitions? The managing partner is a man named Antoine Brewer, real estate developer out of Columbia. She slid a printout across the table. Your son-in-law is listed as a consultant on 2 of their previous projects. And here's the part that kept me up past midnight. She pulled out another page. Your son-in-law's mother runs a private investment group, also out of Columbia, also real estate. One of her recent acquisitions was a historic B&B in Beaufort. She bought it from a 71-year-old widow at significantly below market value, 18 months after the widow's husband died. I sat there with the weight of it settling over me like water rising in a closed room. She's done this before, I said. The Beaufort case was settled quietly. No criminal charges. My sister's voice was measured. But the pattern is there. And I've already made a call to the Attorney General's office in Beaufort County. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from my daughter. Mama, Terrell's mother would like to come down this weekend and meet you properly. She travels with her family attorney. Hope that's okay. Just wants everyone to get acquainted. Saturday around noon? I showed my sister. She read it twice. They're moving faster because they found the clause, she said. They know your daughter doesn't inherit automatically. They need you to sign something before I'm fully involved. She looked up. Let them come. But I'll be here. Saturday arrived gray and humid, the kind of Charleston morning where the air sits heavy on your shoulders before you've had your first cup of coffee. I wore the blue dress Edward had always liked, and the pearl earrings his mother had given me, and I waited on the porch with my hands folded in my lap, and my heart beating harder than I wanted it to. 3 cars pulled into the cobblestone drive. My son-in-law's mother stepped out of the silver Mercedes like a woman who expected the ground to be honored by her footstep. She was in her early 60s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of polished Southern grace that can make condescension sound like a compliment. Behind her came a man in his mid-50s carrying a leather briefcase, introduced as her attorney, Lionel Mack, and behind him came another man, tall, early 40s, the kind of careful face that's practiced at looking trustworthy. He introduced himself as Antoine Brewer, a hospitality industry advisor, working with the family's investment group. She had brought her developer to my house. My daughter hung back, standing close to her husband, her eyes moving between her mother-in-law and me with something I couldn't quite read. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. They settled themselves in the front parlor. My parlor, the one Edward had painstakingly restored from the original plaster ceiling to the heart pine floors. And my son-in-law's mother began the way women like her always begin, with warmth that doesn't reach the eyes. Judith, I've heard so much about you. Edward sounds like he was a remarkable man. She pressed my hand between both of hers. We want to honor his legacy. That's all any of us want here. Lionel Mack opened his briefcase. Mrs. Alderton, what we're proposing is a management trust arrangement. Terrell would assume operational authority over the Magnolia House, with oversight by our investment group. You would retain residency rights and a monthly income draw. It's a protective structure, purely for your benefit. For my benefit, I said. These historic properties are complex to maintain, Antoine offered, his voice smooth. One structural issue with a building this old, and without proper corporate protection, your personal assets are at risk. I looked at the document on my coffee table, the coffee table Edward had found at an estate sale in Somerville and refinished himself one winter. I did not touch it. The parlor door opened behind me. My sister walked in the way she always walked into rooms, quietly, completely, like she had always been there and everyone else had simply not noticed until now. She was wearing slacks and a blazer, reading glasses pushed up on her head, carrying a folder thick enough that the room took note of it. I'm sorry I'm late, she said pleasantly. She pulled the chair next to mine and sat down. I'm Doris, Judith's sister. She looked around the room with the same expression she used when reviewing financial statements. Patient, thorough, already 3 steps ahead. And I'm the co-trustee of Edward Alderton's estate, so anything regarding the Magnolia House goes through me first. I watched the color shift in my son-in-law's mother's face. Watched Antoine's careful expression recalibrate. Watched my son-in-law go very still. Lionel Mack cleared his throat. I wasn't informed there was a co-trustee. No, my sister agreed pleasantly. I don't imagine you were. She opened her folder. Let's talk about what we actually have here. You've brought a management agreement that would transfer operational control of a $2.4 million property to Terrell, with oversight by his mother's investment group, the same group that commissioned an unauthorized appraisal of this property 6 weeks ago, valued it at $1.1 million, which is roughly half its actual worth, and the same group that employs Antoine Brewer, who has a documented business relationship with your son-in-law that predates this marriage by 4 years. The room was very quiet. Those documents are confidential, Lionel Mack started. Property appraisals filed with the county assessor's office are public record, my sister said. The business partnership filings with the South Carolina Secretary of State are also public record. I've had 40 years to learn where records live. She set a page on the coffee table. I've also spoken with the Attorney General's office in Beaufort County regarding the acquisition of the Kellerman Inn in 2021. A transaction that bears a notable resemblance to what's being attempted here. That conversation happened this morning. Antoine Brewer stood up. We're leaving, my son-in-law's mother said. You can leave, my sister said, her voice unchanged. But I'd like Keisha to stay. She looked at my daughter, really looked at her, the way women in our family look at each other when something important cannot wait. Sweetheart, I think you need to hear some things. My daughter looked at her husband. He had gone the color of old chalk. Something cracked open in her face, just barely, but I could see it. I'm staying, she said. My son-in-law's mother looked at her son with an expression that tried to be disappointment and landed somewhere colder. Then she gathered herself and walked out. Antoine followed. Lionel Mack snapped his briefcase shut and was gone. Her husband didn't move for a long moment. He stood looking at my daughter, and I watched him understand that something was over. Keisha. How long? Her voice was very quiet. He didn't answer. How long have you been planning to sell this inn? Silence. Before Daddy died, she asked. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Before he died, she said again, not a question. I thought about Edward, about how he'd grown quieter in the last year of his life, about how he'd called my sister 8 months before the end, about a man who loved his daughter enough to protect her inheritance from the person she'd chosen, but loved her more than that, enough to leave the choice to her. Her husband left. My daughter sat in the front parlor of the Magnolia House and cried for a long time, and I sat beside her, and neither of us said anything for a while because some things don't need words right away. Eventually she looked up. I didn't know, Mama, about Antoine, about the appraisal. He said we were just trying to help you. I believe you, I said. And I did. I had watched my daughter's face when my sister laid everything out. That was not the face of someone performing surprise. That was the face of someone learning a truth about the person she'd given 6 years of her life to. What happens now? She asked. My sister, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, came in and sat across from us. Now the Attorney General's office has what they need to take the Beaufort investigation further. The unauthorized appraisal here is being reviewed. Your husband's involvement in Tidewater acquisitions while representing himself as your mother's advisor, there are legal questions that need to be answered. She paused. None of it moves fast. Justice rarely does, but it moves. She reached into her folder and pulled out an envelope. It was addressed to me in Edward's handwriting. His attorney had been holding it with instructions to deliver it 6 months after his death. It had arrived 2 weeks earlier, and my sister had been waiting for the right moment. He wanted you to have it when things were settled, she said softly. I think this qualifies. I held the envelope for a moment, then I opened it. Judith, if you're reading this, then Doris did what I asked, and you've come through whatever I was afraid might come. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything. You would have worried, and I'd spent 31 years trying to protect you from worrying about things you didn't need to carry. Maybe that was its own kind of mistake. I restructured the trust because I saw something in Terrell that I couldn't prove and couldn't name, only feel. Engineers learn to trust what the numbers suggest, even when the structure looks intact. Something in the structure of that arrangement felt wrong to me. But I didn't do it to punish our girl. I did it because I believe she is better than some of the choices she's been making, and I wanted her to have a reason to prove it. The inn is hers if she wants to earn it. Not because I'm handing it over, but because she builds it beside you. The Magnolia House was never just a business. You know that. It was the thing we made out of nothing but stubbornness and faith. Don't let anyone sell it for less than what it's worth. Love always, Edward. I read it twice. My daughter read it over my shoulder, and when I looked at her, her eyes were wet and her chin was lifted, and she looked more like her father's daughter than she had in years. He believed in me, she said quietly. He always did, I told her, even when he was scared for you. 8 months later, the Magnolia House opened its summer season, with a new assistant manager on staff, my daughter, who had spent the spring learning every corner of the inn she'd grown up in, and somehow never truly known. The divorce was finalized in March. Her ex-husband had countered, dragged things out, hired an aggressive attorney, and then the Attorney General's investigation into Tidewater Acquisitions produced a subpoena for his financial records, and the countering stopped. His mother was still fighting a civil complaint in Beaufort County. Antoine Brewer had quietly dissolved his partnerships and relocated to Charlotte. Lionel Mack was under a bar association review. These things moved slow, like my sister said. But they moved. My sister came down for the 4th of July weekend and sat on the porch swing with a glass of sweet tea, watching the harbor. She'd always claimed she didn't like the heat. She was there for 5 days. One evening I found my daughter in Edward's kitchen garden, deadheading the roses the way he'd shown her when she was 9 years old. She didn't know I was watching. She worked with the kind of careful attention that looks like love from the outside, and I thought about my husband and what he'd planted here. Not just the roses, not just the inn, but something in his daughter that had been waiting for the right conditions to grow. I stayed in the doorway and didn't interrupt. Some things you build with your hands and some things you build by waiting, by trusting what you cannot see yet but believe is there. Edward had built the Magnolia House with his hands and protected it with his faith in us. In all of us, even the ones he was afraid for. I was still learning how to make 1 cup of coffee instead of 2. Still reaching for his side of the bed on certain mornings. Still walking through rooms that held the particular silence of his absence. But I was not drowning. I was here, in the house we had built together, surrounded by people who had chosen to stay. That was not nothing. That was everything.